Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 hitting theaters. Spoiler-free review. What do you think?
Goo, I really, really, really liked this movie. I'm trying to figure out if I loved it. Hopefully, by the time we record our episode, I'll have made a decision. For me, this movie had major Return of the Jedi vibes. And I mean that in a good way. I know some of you don't look at Return of the Jedi in the same light that I do. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's pretty funny that this coincides with the 40-year anniversary of Return of the Jedi. A lot of theaters are showing Return of the Jedi right now. But to me, this pulled the best themes that movie has and echoed them here. And I think it's a great comparison too, Goo, especially after having rewatched Guardians 2014. The first one has a very New Hope-like ending where the Nova Corps is rewarding the Guardians, essentially giving them medals. To me, it's a great third entry story-wise for our Guardians that we knew and loved. I do think it's a little safe, maybe too safe at the end with where some of the characters end up. And I feel like the conclusion is a bit bittersweet. Would you agree with that?
With certain characters, yes. But I do feel like this movie is a love letter to the characters and the world that was built. Yep. And maybe Gunn's time away plays into that.
That's true.
It's not as complete as the first one. It's not as overly silly as the second. But maybe because of the best villain of the trilogy, ? And Rocket's tragic backstory, it's very compelling. I love the conclusion to both Peter and Rocket's stories. Also, this might be the best Nebula stuff. I loved her character in this movie. And I know you couldn't because of how the story is and the story that you were telling. But once again, I wish that the main characters were together for more of the movie. And it's the same complaint that I had for 2. But the downside here is it's not as overly silly as 2, but they do swing and miss at a bunch of jokes. It's a little clunky in its pacing and a smidge long. And I don't love the stories with Drax and Mantis, but they do stick the landing on where they end. Having said that, when it comes to Kraglin and Cosmo, I think those characters are just kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, I don't know if I totally agree with all that, but there are definitely some points there to make. But ultimately, I think we can agree that despite the journey in this movie, that the end is emotional.
Yes.
It's funny and it has great heart,
Yes.
And ultimately the themes, they nailed the themes, maybe don't necessarily nail all of the dialogue and the jokes, but they nail the themes they played with in this movie. And Rocket's backstory is the absolute perfect plot device to show all of the characters' growths, not just Rocket. I'm really going to miss this cast of characters. It's going to be hard for me to care as much as about another group as much as I did for this group of characters. And Goo, I alluded to it in a prior conversation. We shit on the Disney Star Wars stuff. This does a really good job of filling that Star Wars sized void. And ultimately, Goo, I think that we have a new answer to what the best superhero trilogy is.